Can you take me back when we were just kids? We weren't scared of getting older, yeah. 'Cause no one knows you like they know you, and no one probably ever will. You can grow up, make new ones, but truth is, there's nothing like old friends. 'Cause you can't make old friends. Yeah. Can you take me back when we were just kids who weren't scared of getting older? Yeah. Now I've got some good friends now.
Welcome to the show that has little to no meaning and makes little to no sense. It is the show where you can expect the unexpected. This is nonsensical talk on the air and in the cloud. Those crazy hosts will talk about anything and everything. And now, from their home studios in Middle Tennessee, here is your hosts, Alan Robertson and Joey Smith.
All right, Joey.
Here we go.
Yes, sir. Season 2, show number 1.
January. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It almost makes me think of the Happy Joy song from Ren and Stimpy days. So, boy, have we got a treat for y'all today and for the month of January. We actually have 2 interviews or conversations that we had in 2 different locations. One was down in Beverly,
Kentucky, just north of Herndon.
just north or south of, as they would say, south of Hopkinsville.
For you folks in California, just look where Hopkinsville is and Herndon is. They're known places.
Yes.
They don't have NBA teams yet.
But they may.
But they may.
Yes.
But you're going to want to listen to this here. One of the most famous prophets, such as we know of Nostradamus as being a prophet that is well known worldwide. Well, America's best known prophet is Edgar Cayce, born in Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
Yes.
And we're going to the place today and talking to folks of where he went to school. The schoolhouse is still there in Beverly. We interview county historian William Turner. He tells us the stories of it. You're not going to want to miss this, folks. We also go to the
Museum of Historic Hopkinsville and Christian County, the museum up there with Alissa Keller. She's also going to talk a little bit about Edgar Cayce. So William Turner is going to kind of talk about the early years down there in Beverly. He's got his farm actually in Beverly has the schoolhouse that Joey was mentioning there, Beverly Academy. So that thing's been around since the 1800s, and it's an old school, and they really did a good job renovating that to kind of bring it back to what it was. And you're going to enjoy that. You're going to want to go to our website and look at the pictures that was taken inside of the school. So when Joy and I are sitting down with Mr. Turner, we're actually gonna see inside the school, but there's more than just what's behind the camera. So you're gonna want to go check that out. And
so here's the good part of this. You don't have to wait any longer. We're about to go through there magically.
Yes.
Right now.
Right now, and enjoy.
Well, we're here today at Beverly Academy, just north of Herndon, Kentucky, with Mr. William Turner, my teacher in history from Hopkinsville Community College, and county historian. And Mr. Turner, anything that you'd like to tell us about Beverly Academy and its connection with Edgar Cayce and history?
Well, Joy, first of all, it's a pleasure to welcome you to here.
Thank you.
And I hope that my voice will come through all right. It's not what it used to be. But we are in Beverly Academy, the old school of Edgar Cayce at Beverly. Old settlement, the old stores just south of us here. There's a post office there, and this was the name of the community. And all these little communities had one-room country schools. This one was built in 1889 as a subscription school. The farmers donated money, and the money was taken to build a building and hire a teacher and conduct a school. The school lasted 20 years, and it was during that time that Edgar Cayce was a student here. We restored the building about 20 years ago, and it's in need of some more repair. It needs it frequently. But it had served as a corn crib, as a tenant house, as a tool shed, and in its last days before the school was brought back, it was a storage place for artifacts for the Penroy Laird Museum. Mm-hmm. It was full. Back in 1999, one of my students, after your time, Joey, Chris Gilkey,
yes, sir.
I enlisted his help to begin to work on restoring the school. It took 2 years. We first of all had to move everything out and find other places for her, and then start on the building. Now, in the years that it was a tenant house, it had been subdivided into 3 rooms. We were in the back. We are now in what was the back room, the kitchen. Mm-hmm. Then there's a partition running this way, and there were 2 bedrooms, and tenants lived here. So we got all that partition work torn out and started restoring it. It had wallpaper on it. We took the wallpaper off and found the original sealed timbers in it. But most of all, we found behind us the original chalkboard of the school.
Nice.
And in those days, they used wood for chalkboard. Mm-hmm. And went to the paint store and bought a paint that was especially used for blackboard work. So we found that paint at the hardware store and painted it. And so you can write with chalk on that wood and then just rub it off. You see how the names of children there from a Amish or Mennonite group who came here, and they wanted their names on the chalkboard. And so Chris and I worked on the building for 2 years, and in the fall of 2001, just before 9/11, we had a dedication, and over 300 people were here. And we dedicated the building to the memory of Edgar Cayce, as he had attended school here. And one of our neighbors supplied fresh apples for everybody, which we thought was a mighty nice thing to do. So everyone had an apple. And we had a program to launch the restoration work. And since that time, the museum in town has conducted classes here for students. Students come by school bus, and they have classes, have lessons taught, and they bring their sack lunch with them and have lunch. We usually have a porta-john close by, and they make a day of it. And they really seem to like spending the day in a country school.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
And so we also have put up coal lamps on each side and in the center, and occasionally have events here at night where people will come and we'll have a supper and a program. And that's a great atmosphere with the coal lamps lighted. The walls have maps on them, and they're relief maps. Now, this school didn't have relief maps originally, but these maps are of that time period, and the relief map shows the mountains and the valleys, as you can run your hand over them and see it work. And we found an old schoolmaster's desk, and the a.r.e., which is the Virginia Beach, the Edgar Cayce Foundation,
yes, sir,
provided money for that desk that we have used here. And we have an old tattered American flag that the Woodman of the World gave us. And you'll notice the alphabet above the chalkboard, which was typical in every school. And also the picture of Washington. Many people have asked why we don't have Lincoln in here. Well, this school operated in South Christian County in the 20 years, 30 years, 40 years after the Civil War.
Yeah.
You wouldn't find a picture of Lincoln here. This was Southern territory. And then over on the far wall to the left, you'll see some pictures. At the top is a lithograph of President Grover Cleveland and his cabinet. And then below are three men. The one on the left is James A. McKenzie, and I'll come back and tell you a story on him in a minute. He was a U.S. congressman at the time the school opened. In the middle is Adlai Stevenson, the grandfather of the man some people today remember. Adlai Stevenson, the elder, was Postmaster General. And then the man on the right was John D. Clardy, who was U.S. congressman from this district at the time the school was in operation. Now back to James A. McKenzie, a real interesting story. You know, you've heard the story about Edgar and his daddy having an argument over his study, and Edgar asked his daddy if he couldn't take a nap one night on top of the spelling book. So they put the spelling book under the pillow, and when Edgar had taken the nap over a few minutes, he awakened, and he was able to spell the word cabin, which he had hung up on, plus he was able to spell all the other words in the book. Now, some days after that, Edgar's father, Squire Les Cayce, met on the street in Hopkinsville Congressman James McKenzie. Well, James McKenzie had heard about Squire Cayce's son, who could go to sleep on the book, who could do all sorts of unusual things. And so, Quinine Jim, as we call the congressman, said to Les, Edgar's father, "Here's a copy of the speech I made on the tariff about getting rid of quinine, tariff against, to get rid of the tariff from quinine." Quinine was used in the 1870s and 80s as a principal medicine for children in eradicating chills. And there was a high tariff on quinine because it was imported from South America. Well, there's a great hue and cry throughout the community, all over, of an attempt to get Congress to remove the tariff on quinine because it made it so high. So James A. McKenzie, who was a cousin of Alvin Barkley, by the way, was also a noted orator. And McKenzie made a speech of an hour before Congress on why they should remove the tariff of quinine. And he was successful. It was removed. And he became known for that speech, and thus the moniker Quinine Jim was adopted to his name. Everybody knew him as Quinine Jim McKenzie. And his folks lived in Flat Lick.
Okay.
South of here, southwest of here. And so Congressman McKenzie gave the speech to Squire Cayce and said, "See if your boy can commit this to memory and recite it." So Squire went home, talked to the boy about the speech, and let him read it over. And then 2 nights before a big gathering here at Beverly Academy of the neighborhood, Squire Cayce read the speech to Edgar. Edgar listened. With his photographic memory, he recalled every word. And so on the night of the big gathering here at Beverly Academy, Edgar stood here on the platform and recited that speech to the crowd assembled. Everyone was just spellbound that a boy, maybe in the 8th grade, could recite a speech of an hour.
Oh, goodness.
And so that added to his notoriety and made him much better known. And it is one of those things that we talk about as far as this building is concerned, because he recited that speech in this room. And so Edgar went to the 3rd grade. That was all.
Yeah.
He attended this school from 1890 to 1893 and had no more formal schooling. The school continued for another 17 years. At that time, the school was located up on the corner of the farm.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather bought it in 1916 after he had lost a tenant house by fire and rolled it on logs over here to this site to use as a tenant house and later on a storage building. And so since 2001, we've had groups of people come from everywhere. In fact, when we have the Edgar Cayce seminar in March each year, we bring them out here on a bus, and I tell them the story of the schoolhouse as it relates to the life of Edgar Cayce.
That is awesome. I tell you, I've been reading some of your material, and actually a lot of it for the last couple of months since Joey and I decided that Edgar Cayce was going to be who we were going to focus on our January podcast. And it's just been one of those things where you tell the stories of him growing up. As a matter of fact, he didn't grow up too far from just south of here.
Right.
As a matter of fact, you're a member of the church that he attended.
Right.
And behind that was the schoolhouse before he came to the academy. Love the stories that you were telling about that, and so that's some really great information. And
He was born on the 18th of March, 1877, on a farm, 2 farms south of here. The house is gone, but he was born in a little cottage on that farm that his mother had inherited, which his daddy promptly lost when he bought Beverly's store and sold the farm, put the money in Beverly's store, lost that. And then they moved to Hopkinsville. And that's a whole other chapter in the life of Edgar Cayce.
And that's after.
And I know that you were saying that whenever they were down here, that if you think about late 1800s, early 1900s, Western Kentucky is dirt roads. Someone, even though they were 6 miles away, you might not go to Hopkinsville, but just like a couple times a year.
Exactly. And that was to the circus and maybe to do some shopping, to buy some shoes for the winter. Because otherwise, Edgar and all of his friends went barefooted.
Well, you also told a story about Edgar, his first trip to Hopkinsville, and for it just to be 5.5 miles up the road here, that his first trip, he was well into his older age. I mean,
He's nearly a grown man.
Yes.
When he made that trip. It was a dirt road. And he went with his daddy to pay the taxes on the county land. And, of course, to go to the circus. Well, the circus was all the world to that country boy, because he had read and seen pictures of wild animals. And now to be able to go to a program that had an array of all those animals is almost more than he could take in.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about one of the other stories that I got really intrigued that you told was about how growing up, his grandfather was actually killed in an accident.
Yes, he was. It's an interesting story. When Edgar was 3 years old, he was on horseback with his daddy over at his grandfather, Tom Cayce's farm. That's northeast of here, about a mile.
Okay.
And the elder Cayce, who was 51 at the time, went into the pond on horseback for the horse to get water. But something frightened the horse. It may have been a snake in the water or something. And the horse reared. When it reared, Tom Cayce fell off backward. The horse turned around and came down on Cayce with his hooves and drowned him right there.
Oh.
And a nearby neighbor was called to come and retrieve the body. And so Edgar was a witness all this. as he saw it all, it had to make an impression even on a child of 3. Then he was present when his grandmother died. When he was about 14, he was with her when she died. And Edgar's grandfather, some claimed, had supernatural powers. At least he could see visions, he could talk to people who weren't present, and Edgar may have inherited that tendency from him. We don't know. But as a little boy, Edgar had imaginary playmates, and we'd go over into the woods, and these playmates would appear, and he would play with them, talk to them, and that puzzled the family. They couldn't figure this out. But they didn't really question it. Edgar's parents were very supportive of this strange capability that he had. We sum it up this way. Edgar Cayce had supernatural powers, psychic powers. We don't know exactly why. Edgar didn't know why. He wrestled for years trying to determine the source. He finally came to the conclusion that it was God-given and was not his place to question it. And so he lived out his life committed to that line of thought.
Yes, sir. And
it's interesting that I know you've spoken on this before, that he recognized that if this is supernatural, he wanted it to not be used for evil or bad. And I think you mentioned that while he was in one of his trances, some people tried to ask him who's winning horse races.
Yes. When Edgar came back to Hopkinsville, Edgar went to Bowling Green to live in 1902, worked in a photography studio. About 1910, he came back to Hopkinsville, and with 2 other men, Dr. Wesley Ketchum and A.D. No, who owned Hotel Latham, he entered into an agreement of the Psychic Reading Corporation. And they set him up in a first-class photography studio, and he was to give readings. He did not charge for readings, but people sent money as a donation for their medical readings. He discovered that these 2 men were shysters and were taking the money. And he realized it because he began to suffer terrible headaches and couldn't figure what was wrong. And in a reading, he revealed that he was being taken advantage of. So he got loose from them. They sued him for not carrying out the agreement in their contract. It was settled out of court, and he was exonerated. But he had had enough of Hopkinsville. And so he left here and went to Alabama, eventually settling in Selma, Alabama, where he continued as a photographer. And then within very few years comes the oil chapter, where he got interested in oil wells in Texas. That didn't pan out either. The men who were backing him were keeping secret where he said the oil was. They would have to dig somewhere else. Then when he was out of the picture and back in Alabama, they dug on those sites where he said there was oil, and they struck it rich. But he was never a wealthy man monetarily. He accepted money people gave him, but he never asked for it. And he died in material wealth, a very poor man, but in contributions, a wealthy man.
Yeah, we. It seems like everywhere that Edgar Cayce went, people were always trying to take advantage of him. And
Yes.
I guess his wife was one of the ones that kind of put a stranglehold on some of that.
Yes, because where the problem came was these other people would take advantage of him in a reading. So she started being present at all readings as his stenographer, and would not allow these men to take advantage of him.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't she a major that kind of lived near here as
His
well?
mother was a major.
His mother was a major.
Yes.
So
His wife Gertrude was Evans
Evans.
in Hopkinsville.
Okay.
In fact, I'm kin to Edgar through the Cayce side and the major side, both.
Oh, okay.
Said his dad was a Cayce, his mother was a major. My mother was a major.
Once a year, is the Cayce reunion still a going thing?
No, we had two of them.
Okay.
In 88, maybe three, in 88, 89. The big one was in 88.
And of course, I knew about this is whenever I was dating Elizabeth Higgins, and that the Higgins family was related to the Cayce family.
Yes.
But a lot of good history that you don't have to go to a DC to find. It's right here at home and in our backyard. And you probably drive past it every day.
Yes, you do. The Cayces moved here from Cumberland County, Virginia, settled near here in 1817, and have lived here ever since.
Well, the interesting thing is Joey and I talk all the time. We at least once a week we have to have a what we call a production meeting where we actually go through stuff we want to talk about and what our ideas are. Mostly it's his ideas because he's been in your class and he learned a lot about the history of this area through your class. So, but it's interesting. I live just probably 8 miles south of here on the Fett Road.
Bennestown.
Bennestown, yeah.
And I used to drive up and down the Fett Road 100 times and never turn my eyes to the right to even look over here at the Beverly Academy. And to be able to come back to it, and I was shocked that it was still here. I had seen the general store, and I knew that was still part of it. I didn't know it was Beverly. Joey was the one that says, "Oh, that's Beverly." I went, "No, that's just outside of Flat Lick. That's Christian County, right?"
We've talked a lot here, and we're going to go look at the museum. What should we look at the museum and make sure we not miss when we go up there and look at it?
Look at all the pictures. He was a photographer.
Yes.
I love pictures and collect them. And as you'll see them on the wall back over there. And to me, Edgar Cayce did so much to record what places and people look like. By example, with this film that you're making,
Yes, sir.
hopefully it will last.
Yeah.
And it will be an image of the three of us into the future long after we're gone.
That's what we're hoping.
That's a great way. It's a document, is what those pictures were, and he was about documenting time.
He did. He documented time and place.
And Joey always likes to refer to us as we're putting history for the people that are coming after us.
Yes.
And
exactly
everything that
right.
we do, if nobody picks up anything, that we're pulling the people in. We're trying to pull in as many people as we can to get as much information, because we're not that smart, but we want people to see what we missed as growing up. Because if I would have put more interest in 20 or 30, 35
We
years
waited
ago,
until we were 50.
we waited until after we were over 50 before we got
So
started.
we're in the halfway part of our life.
Yeah,
we're going to live to be 100, so might as well start this mess.
Yeah. And that's kind of what Joey and I are doing is we go through our history. Any place we go to, any places that take donations, we always try to give more. We always try to give back to the community. We may not be rich,
That's
but
very
we may be able to keep some of that history still out there. Very important for
Someone put all this stuff here for us, and they planted a seed, and they say that a wise old man plants an oak tree when they know they'll never get to enjoy sitting under the shade of it.
But future generations will.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, Ms. Turner, I want to thank you and Chris did an outstanding job.
Thank you.
And and when we wrap up here, I'm going to be taking pictures because I want this on the website, and I want everybody to get in touch with the Pennyroyal Museum up in Hopkinsville, Christian County, and see about getting down here to see the Beverly Academy. Cayce, Edgar
You said
Cayce.
March? March is whenever you have the
Edgar Cayce seminar. And anyone interested, just give me a call. My number is 270-498-1212.
And there you go. And I'm going to tell you what, that is going straight to him. And so, and for it, and the schoolhouse sits on his property. So,
Palmyra Road.
Yes.
Takes you to Palmyra. Alan asked me, where's this road at?
Oh, William Turner, thank you so much for sitting down with us and discussing a little bit about the Edgar Cayce
Thank
years.
you so much.
Thank
It's
you,
a pleasure
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
to be with you both.
Yes, sir. Thank you so
I really
much.
appreciate you all coming.
All right, sir.
you.
Awesome.
All right, Joey. Well, I hope you enjoyed our trip down memory lane there with Mr. Turner. He actually discussed a lot of the stuff that you can find in a couple of books that we've used to learn more about Edgar Cayce himself. Edgar Cayce, An American Prophet, which is by Sidney Kilpatrick, and There Is a River, which is by Thomas Sugrue. Now, Thomas Sugrue was a good friend of Hugh, which was the son of Edgar Cayce. So that's how, and he was not a believer, so people would look at There Is a River as being the one to go to. And I read both of them, and I'm going to tell you the story. I went through the Kilpatrick one first, American Prophet, but I'm learning more in depth how Edgar felt during the time when in the book There Is a River. He actually was a deep man, and he cared what people thought of him, and so it was very interesting. And Alissa Keller is going to take us down that memory here. So let's send it out to the backdrop of the museum, because there's another place that you're going to want to look at the website. Beautiful display out there. So please get out to the Museum of Historic at Hopkinsville in Christian County, because they did a renovation during the pandemic, and it is phenomenal. It's very good. It's a great place to go.
Let's go there now.
And we're here with Alissa Keller, and she is going to help us out. Look behind us here at this wonderful display of Edgar Cayce.
Hands down, the most well-known person to date, we'll say, that's ever come out of Christian County, Hopkinsville and Christian County. He was born in the southern part of the county, in a little town called Beverly at the time, on March 18th of 1877. And as a child, from everything I've read and studied, was kind of a unique kid, a little different. He even had a nickname. They called him Old Man at church. He started going to church, to Liberty Christian Church, kind of on his own, and then brought his family with him. And he was one of the ones that took care of putting out communion, and was like kind of a caretaker even as a kid. So had this kind of this persona that extended past this little kidness, I would say. He also had some interesting abilities even as a little kid, and luckily was surrounded by loved ones and people in his family that encouraged and fostered this, and didn't convince him that he was crazy or that he shouldn't be seeing things or whatever it might be. So there's stories of him in the woods when he would see fairies. There's a lot written on fairies in the Cayce work, and how according to all of the readings that Cayce did and all of the depth that they go into, that we all can do this stuff. It's just we have to be our consciousness has to be raised to that place. So he was exceptional, but what he was doing, everybody else could do if you took the time and were aware and conscious of what was around you. So Edgar would spend time in the woods. He would see fairies. He also had what they called the little people. And the little people were imaginary friends, would be the way I would describe them. But these weren't just imaginary friends. They had full backstories. And he would play with these little people in the garden and on the farm. And one book, There's a River, the biography that was written on Edgar in 1942. So when he was even still alive. Okay. It was I don't know that the New York Times had a bestseller list then, but it was a bestseller when Edgar was still living even. That his mother could see him on occasion. Now, I mean, and this is coming from somebody, I shouldn't admit this, but like I had imaginary friends when I was a kid, but I didn't really see them.
Right.
I think wanted to talk to them, and I named them after soft drinks, which was weird, but whatever. But these, if you read enough about Edgar and about like soul development and how souls come and go and have soul groups and group together based on previous soul experiences, that these were souls that he had been with before that were there to kind of comfort him and get him going, that hadn't made it into our plane yet. This stuff it's deep.
It is.
It is deep. When I started working at the local history museum, I did not know all the things I was going to need to know, and it's been really fascinating and fun. So Edgar grows up like this, and he has a couple of health issues. He was hit in the head with a ball at one point and had a concussion. That's what it really sounds like, and was real sick from it. And while he finally, I think, told his mother what needed to happen. It was like a poultice that needed to be made to put on his head, and it cured him. And I mean, this is like a 10-year-old kid. Like, how did he know how to do this? So I think that he was considered a little strange and a little odd, but he's down in a small area, small community. Everybody knows him. Everybody kind of knows what to expect from him. Everybody knows his family, and so everything I've read sounds like that until he's in his like mid-20s, he kind of goes back and forth. Like he recognizes that he can do things other people can't, but doesn't necessarily want to be able to do things other people can't. One story about him being out in the country and in the woods is that an angel came to see him, and that's why we have an angel up on the wall here. That an angel came to visit him and asked him what he wanted to do. Like, he had these special powers, and how did he want to use them? And he said he wanted to help people, especially children. And overwhelmingly, if he used this skill, this talent, this gift he had to help people, it worked. Sometimes people say he never got paid for his readings, and he never relied on that payment, but he would be paid for things here and there. But if he ever tried to go down some other avenue and tried to like make money through it, it didn't work. It just really didn't work. And so as long as he was dedicated to helping people and to being true to himself and to his beliefs, and he did really remarkable, amazing work. They called him readings over time. It took a long time to figure out what he could do, and I mean, I just can't imagine how hard that had to have been on him. So he grows up in Beverly. His family moves to town when he's like in his late teens, and he starts working at a bookstore in town, and he loses his voice. And doesn't lose his voice kind of, but like loses his voice, vocal paralysis really. And this is like always the story when it comes to Edgar Cayce readings, health readings at least, is then you go to see the doctor, and then you go to all the specialists, and nobody has an answer, and then you get an Edgar Cayce reading. Like it's like
he's your last resort
for a while at least. So he finally he has been to all the specialists. No one knows what's going on. People in town apparently said, he like walked around with a little pad of paper and a pencil to communicate. And then at a show at Holland's Opera House on Main Street in Hoptown, he saw a hypnotist, and he went up and was hypnotized. And while he was hypnotized, he could speak. And like everybody there knew that Edgar Cayce couldn't talk. He had been like everyone's favorite bookstore clerk at Hopper Brothers bookstore. Once he lost his voice, he had to kind of find different employment, and that's when he started working as a photographer, because he could work in the dark room, and he trained as a photographer because he didn't have to talk to people. People in town knew Edgar, and they knew that he couldn't talk. And so when he goes up and is hypnotized and he can speak while he's under hypnosis, I mean, like, the room's astounded, I'm so glad they didn't make him like cluck like a chicken or something. This is back when like hypnosis was like considered a medical treatment. It wasn't just entertainment. They call it mesmerism a lot. Anyway, but when he came out of the hypnotic trance, he couldn't talk again. And there was a man there that night named Dr. Al Lane, and Dr. Lane had done some like correspondence course and was an osteopath. Right. And he had like some buddies that he, like communicated with who had been studying hypnosis. So he like started corresponding, like, what can we do with this guy? So he starts working one-on-one with Edgar. And overwhelmingly, when Edgar was in a conscious waking state, he couldn't talk. When he was in a in his subconscious, in a hypnotic state or trance, he could talk again, and then he'd wake up, same thing. So finally, I think through some guidance with Dr. Lane, it's like, well, ask whatever voice is coming out of him when he's in this trance, what needs to happen, and see what the voice says.
Yeah.
And so that's what they do. And so at a house on West 7th Street, with Edgar's parents in the room, they say, you know, like, what is wrong? They said, I think it was the blood flow to the vocal cords or something had been hindered. And the voice coming out of Edgar, and I'll say that because I don't know that it was Edgar.
Right. If it's the blood
source,
flow,
the source is what it's often referred to in any of the writings about Edgar. It said to restore the blood flow. Oh, it said to loosen his collar, and then to tell his body to restore the blood flow to his throat. And then that his throat would swell and get red, and when the swelling went down, to wake him up. Okay. No, when the swelling went down, to return the blood flow to normal, and then to wake him up. So they did all of that. They said everything went just like they said. When he woke up, he coughed, and he coughed a little blood up, and then he could talk again. And there's some speculation, or speculation's a big word, but there's some thought that he had this gift, and he wasn't using it, and so his voice got taken.
if you're not going to use it,
we're
it's
gonna
like a muscle that you're not using.
And so then he started working with Al Lane and started doing readings for people, and trying to kind of figure out, this is the time he ends up moving from Hopkinsville and lives in Bowling Green, opens a photography studio there. And this is when, you know, like, buddies would put him in a trance and like poke him with needles and stuff to see if he'd flinch. I mean, like, they don't know what's going on.
Right.
So it takes a while to really figure out the process that needs to be respected and gone through. He needed to have 2 people at least in the room with him. When he's in a trance, he's saying all these things. This voice is coming out of him and providing medical information that is intense.
Yeah.
The readings read almost like an autopsy. I mean, they are going through every physiological system in your body, and so somebody had to be there to write it down. If he was doing a reading for someone, that person, he needed to know where they were. It didn't matter where they were. He just needed to know where. And that some readings start out with comments on, like, somebody could be hundreds of miles away, but comments on what they could see out their window, or what pajamas what they're wearing at the time. So something,
Almost like he would go there.
Yeah, like his consciousness would go there. Some of it's like, there's no way to explain this, but some of the ways it's been explained is that he was moving from a conscious through subconscious to a super conscious state, where he was just like in tune with everything. He's often called the father of holistic medicine, because when he would give these health readings, so of the more than 14,000 readings, about over 9,000 are health readings, or categorized as physical readings or health readings, because he did readings on what they would call life readings, which are looking into past lives. He did like mechanical readings and technological readings. He did business readings. He did lots of different kinds of things, but the bulk of them are the health readings, or the physical readings, I think is the official way to put them, but called holistic medicine, because it was not like, okay, well, you're sick and you're going to need to take this. But no. It was a whole body, mind, and spirit approach to health. Someone might, like meditation might be part of your recommended treatment. Massage therapy, osteopathic and like chiropractic adjustments.
One I saw where a person broke their kneecap.
Oh yeah.
And he had
That's
to.
a hop down story.
Yep.
And he told how to
drill the hole.
And put a nail.
They always say it was like, I've always heard it described as looking like a roofing nail, because it had a flat head, and it was George Dalton was the man, right around 1905, I think. I may be a little off on that. That he, again, he'd seen all the specialists, and he was never going to walk again, and got a reading from Cayce, and it was a pin. They put a pin in his knee.
Yeah.
And the pin was this nail made at
was
Ford's
like,
machine shop.
When you think of like a 4-penny nail, the weight of the iron is like, his detailed readings were down to the weight of the metal in the nail to use, and exactly the angle and where to drill into the kneecap is. So it can't be explained, and it's supernatural. Mr. Turner was saying that's probably the best term for it. He didn't know where this power is coming from. He just wanted to use the powers to do good things.
To do good things.
And it didn't work right if he was ever manipulated to use it for not good things.
Well, yeah. So when he was actually, so he bounced around for a little while, and from right around 1910, to about 1912, he was back in Hopkinsville, and he lived here, and he and 3 other men created the Hopkinsville Psychic Reading Corporation.
Yes.
And it was he and his father, a guy named Dr. Wesley Ketchum, and who was a homeopathic physician in town, and then A.D. No, and Mr. No owned the Hotel Latham, and Ketchum had an office across the street from the Hotel Latham. Fun fact, on the 2nd floor above the Dalton Brick Company's office. George Dalton was the one who had the pen put in his knee. Anyway, but part of the agreement was that they would also set Edgar up with a photography studio. So Edgar was he was a psychic diagnostician in Hoptown, and then had operated a photography studio for a couple of years. Now, this is early on, though, in this process, so they don't really know what all he needs. Well, he doesn't know what all he needs, and he needs these 2 people in the room, one to write down everything he says, and then one to lead him through the reading. Because overwhelmingly, when he's in a trance, the source only answers the questions it's given. It's not just like, no, I'm in a trance and I'm going to tell you everything. No. I mean, it's very pointed. So they called it a conductor. And so someone had to conduct the reading. And Edgar would lay down. He would put his hands over his solar plexus. He would loosen, I think, his collar and his shoelaces, and I think maybe even his the cuffs on his sleeves. And he would lay his hands over, and they said that you had to watch him. And when his eyelids started to flutter, that you had to start the prompt, which was like, you have before you the body of Alissa Keller or whatever, and if you didn't, he'd go to sleep. He'd be out. And so it was this process though of figuring all this out. And when he was here and working specifically with Dr. Ketchum, sometimes Ketchum was the only one there.
Right.
And so Ketchum would put him in the trance and be the one to take down all the information. So like there were no other witnesses, and Edgar started getting really bad headaches. And so he decided he was going to start following up with the people who were sending letters, because that's what people would do. They'd send a letter, talk. He really didn't even need to know what was going on because it didn't mean much to him. But they'd send a letter with their appeal, and they would correspond, set up a time, and know where this person is. And Edgar started following up, and people weren't getting the responses. And so then he figured out that Ketchum was putting him under with nobody else around, and instead of doing what he was supposed to do and what Edgar had agreed on, he was asking him about, like horse races and gambling and things like that. And it made Edgar physically ill. One of my favorite stories, early reading he gave for a little girl in town. Her name was Amy Dietrich. And this was one he worked with Aline for, and Amy was about 5 years old. I think that's about right. And she had, grown up and had been progressed in a very kind of like normal pattern, and then started to regress, and her family nobody specialists couldn't figure it out. Yeah. And so they bring Edgar in, and she had fallen getting out of a carriage and had wrenched her spine, and it caused scar tissue that was preventing blood flow to go to her brain. Mm-hmm. And so the problem was, osteopathic adjustments were her treatment. And Dr. Lane could do them, so he did them. And then Edgar gave a follow-up reading, and he didn't do them right. So he did them again. And then the 3rd time he got them right. And within days, this little girl was like calling her mother by, calling her mama, and she ended up growing up, went to college, lived a very full life. Mm-hmm. Okay, the reading aside, the fact that they did the reading and the adjustment, without the follow-up reading, they wouldn't have known. They probably would have thought that, this is all bunk and didn't work.
Right.
So it was the long dream to have a hospital, so that he could do the readings and then have the treatments done all under one roof. And he did that. It's
unfortunate that he had to go to Virginia to do that.
Well, it is unfortunate, but that's where he would give readings on himself. Mm-hmm. And the readings for Edgar Cayce as a soul said that Virginia Beach, Virginia was the place to go.
Now, did he establish the a.r.e? He
did. It wasn't the first thing he did. At first, it was the Cayce Hospital right around 1928, and it didn't last very long. His big funding came out of stockbrokers in New York City. There were 2 brothers, Morton and Edwin Blumenthal. So I think the Blumenthals are a little upset that they were not warned more heavily about the stock market crash.
1929.
In October of 29. But they again, patterns. And I think some of those readings did point to patterns of a downfall in the, But anyway, so with the stock market crash and the head doctor at the hospital was a man named Dr. Thomas House. And Dr. House was from Springfield, Tennessee, but he married a woman from Hoptown, Carrie Salter was her name. Carrie was Gertrude's aunt. Gertrude Evans Cayce is Edgar's wife. And Gertrude's mother and Carrie are sisters, right? But Gertrude's mama is the oldest and Carrie's the youngest, which makes Carrie and Gertrude...
They're close in
like
age.
Aunt and... aunt
almost
and niece,
like cousins.
but they're but they're more like sisters,
Yeah.
and they were kind of raised that way. And Carrie, I stand by that. Carrie's my favorite character in the whole story of the whole thing, and none of this would have happened without Carrie. Well, Carrie marries Dr. House, and she, with the hospitals established in the 20s, they pick up and leave Hopkinsville and move to Virginia Beach to run the hospital. So Dr. House is going to be the head doctor. Carrie is the head nurse and takes care of the patients with her husband. And it was in September, I think, of 29, so just ahead of the stock market crash. Dr. House died, and when Dr. House died, his wife Carrie moved back here, and so that rug had kind of been pulled out. And so then they kind of shifted focus from the hospital to, it had another name first. It was like the National Association of Investigators or something, that then grew into the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the a.r.e., which I think dates to 1931. So Edgar would have been, the founding of this.
Yeah.
And he would then continue to do readings much in the way he'd done before, without the ability of immediate treatment on site, but continued to give readings. And he did these, people would send him, they would come see him, but send mail too. And it was after There Is a River was published. Book was written by a man named Thomas Sugrue, and Sugrue had gone to college. I think he'd gone to school with Hugh Lynn Cayce, Edgar's oldest son. And Thomas would Sugrue lived with the Cayces for a while, and he wrote about Edgar. And if you've not read There Is a River, do it. Stop everything and read it. I've read it 3 times now, because every time it's a little bit more to know a little bit more. And then they so this gets published in 42. World War II's going on, and mail was coming into Cayce by the truckload. And at this point again, Edgar gives readings for himself, and when he's giving readings for Edgar are telling him to only do 2 readings a day. He was given 9 readings a day, and
can't make it.
Yeah, it wore himself out, I think, is what it was. He went for quality over quantity of years there at the end. And I think in a real kind of beautiful way, tried to help as many people as he could while he could.
Yeah.
And so he gave readings up. He had a stroke in the fall of 1944, and he died in January of 45.
And what really was wild is that his wife died 3 months later.
Wife died 3 months later.
And that's why was she ill as well? I don't know.
I think, you hear that sometimes with couples that are so close. And they had built a life together.
And to know he was so nationally known in the 30s and 40s when there's not internet and to go, hey, I saw something that went viral here.
Well, and Gertrude had to share Edgar with the world in a lot of ways, and she was not a huge supporter early on.
Well, I know whenever after the death of their first or the second child they had after that.
Well, and actually, laying back there on that table or on that couch, that's a reproduction of the couch that Edgar gave readings on. This was used in a movie that our friends Dr. Greg and Laura Little did. They're Edgar Cayce researchers specifically about the readings about Atlantis, and they are going to find it, and it's fascinating. But they use this couch, but we have a copy of one of Gertrude's readings that was done in 1901, I think on January 1st. When she had tuberculosis, and it was done in Hopkinsville. So she gets tuberculosis, and that's when she gets incredibly sick, near deathbed sick, before she agrees to let her husband do a reading for her. Mm-hmm. Not 1901, it's 1911. I apologize. And she's pregnant and she has tuberculosis, and in the process, I mean, how awful. He goes into this trance. He doesn't remember what he says when he comes out, and so when he wakes up, he finds out that he's given that she's going to be okay, and the baby's going to be born, and the baby's going to die. The baby's not going to live. And so, and that's exactly what happened. But he prescribed through the reading a treatment for the tuberculosis, and she followed it, and she was cured. She was healed. And that back there is a follow-up, actually, reading. And part of the treatment involves a very, very small amount of heroin.
So one of the things that that's right behind your head there, the pit game.
Oh, yeah.
I had read a little bit on the pit game that he invented and then sent it, and then they robbed him of it.
Basically, Parker Brothers did.
Yeah.
So this was when he was living in Bowling Green. It started around 1904, I believe. We have a very old version of Pitt in the cabinet. It was not donated to us. I actually found this on eBay of all places. But it says patent pending, so it's like as old as it can get. But he and one of his buddies that I think was a Hoptown man too, developed this game, and part of it was that Edgar, he like knew things. So he could go in these trances, sure, but he knew things, and he could sense things, even when he was awake. They say that he could see auras around people, and he could tell like how someone was feeling, and if they were in a good mood, or if things were maybe not as good, from that. And he was terrible at cards because he knew what was happening all the time. He was not who you wanted to play cards with, right? And so he developed this pit game, and it's like a commodities trading game is kind of what it is. And it moved so fast that he couldn't keep up with it. And so he could play without like having to be like,
I'm cheating. I know what your hand is.
I know what everyone's hands are, so I fold or whatever,
You're going to win.
Yeah. So he developed Pitt, and then he sold it. It was like big, like one of his buddies like hand drew all the cards, and like I said, it's commodities trading. So you're trying to get like a whole handful of corn or rye or barley or wheat or whatever, and there's a bull and a bear in them. Anyway, there's a bell involved. It's really fun, and it's funny how many people, especially from like the Midwest, know this game. I didn't know it until I started working here, and like have no idea where it came from. But he, I guess, was convinced to offer it to like a big manufacturer, and I think he got paid like $6.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
ridiculous.
And you can buy Pitt in our museum shop right now. I mean, like, it is still available. And he, 150.
Don't go on eBay.
later,
Come to Hopkinsville.
Yeah, come on. And if you want like a very old, a nostalgic vintage version, we don't have those. But you can still get them now, 115 years later, and he got paid, I think, like the equivalent of $6.
That's horrible. That's horrible.
So because you can see that these are, we have these throughout the museum. These are weird and wonderful exhibit, and so we thought that was a kind of a weird and a wonderful story about Hoptown. Everything about Edgar Cayce is a little weird and more than wonderful. So he's like our biggest weird and wonderful.
A lot of the things he did was weird. And it was everybody whenever he was in church as a young child, as you referred to him, the old man earlier, when they found out that he could have this psychic ability, they kind of pushed him out and kind of just blackballed him. Say with like the Bell Witch show, John Bell got excommunicated. They kind of did that to him, and it took a while to get the good favor to get him back into the church again.
Well, I'll say, nothing hurts my feelings more. It seems crazy to think my feelings get hurt for Edgar Cayce, but they do. And nothing hurts my feelings more than when people think or have this assumption that he was doing the work of the devil, or that he was not a devout man, because he, when he was about 10 years old, he decided he was going to read the Bible through every year of his life.
Yes.
And from cover to cover. And when he was 10, he had to make up time, so he read it 10 times.
Yes.
Maybe not all in one year. I don't know how long it took him to get caught up, but then proceeded to read the Bible every year of his life. He was like, he taught Sunday school. He did some program called the Christian Endeavor, which was part of the Disciples of Christ Church. He attended that in Hopkinsville, and when he was in Alabama. He attended a Presbyterian church when he was in Virginia. He was like a remarkable, like say, devout man, very spiritual, very religious, and had a really hard time here and there of like kind of reconciling within himself how these things could all go together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure got called a freak. He was arrested a few times for practicing medicine without a license, and then also being considered doing the work of the devil. And
they played a joke or a trick on him at one of the, I think it was Ketchum as well, when he went to Ketchum's school, and they had opened up the door between classrooms. He was doing a reading. I think I remember this, that he went up there to do a reading or for the class, and they opened the door, and a professor on the other side, they thought that he was going to denounce him, but basically because it was a trick. But the guy the professor came over and says, whatever he's doing, and that's 100% correct of what he just said. And then he came up out of the trance, and they asked him about his background, and he said, I don't know what I said.
Right, he doesn't.
So basically, they had to use the documentation of all the stuff that he had done in order to kind of let everybody know, hey, this guy's for real. Mm-hmm. And he's really good. And the aura, if you look behind us the whole time, you've seen the aura behind us. Cayce's aura keeps changing.
Yes, this was one of our kind of fun, whimsical things we did, is to have Edgar's aura kind of fade in and out. I don't know if you can see Gertrude.
You can barely see Gertrude on this one.
Gertrude's on the other wall, but she only shines kind of a whitish blue, because that's like the most pure aura, and that was kind of to signify that she's his angel, and so
I loved it.
We made her a little different.
And there will be pictures on the website, so don't look at the website and think that you've gone through the museum. Please don't.
We're
Come
just in
here.
the back corner right now.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we have here, so Edgar was a photographer and took a ton of pictures all throughout his life, but he took a ton of pictures of Hopkinsville. And so the wall are photographs. There's one exception of him that he didn't take, but they're all pictures that Edgar Cayce took in Hopkinsville right around, the turn of the century. And so you get some Hoptown history through the eyes of Edgar Cayce. There's a picture of Teddy Roosevelt on the wall, that Teddy Roosevelt came here 1901, I believe, when he was campaigning for vice president and spoke. And there's a picture of him getting out of a carriage that Edgar Cayce took. So one of my friends was in here not too long ago. She's like, that looks like Teddy Roosevelt. I was like, it is Teddy Roosevelt. So anyway, so that's what the wall of pictures is they're all pictures he took.
Thank you so much for allowing us to come in here and do this, and we would love to be able to come back. We want to support Hopkinsville. Come in to the museum, donate to the museum.
Come experience the museum. Have the heart of a giver.
Yes.
And donate to the museum. Get your employer to donate to the museum when you're like, hey, what should we donate to? The museum.
Mm-hmm. And that way they can keep making it look as wonderful as it looks today.
You're going to like it. You're going to be proud.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right. Well, Alissa Keller was full of information, and
great interview.
Yeah, get out to the museum and meet with her.
I want to go again.
We are going again. So me and my wife had talked about some of these places that you and I, Joy, we go, and she's interested after watching these podcasts that she wants to be involved as well. So she wants to go out and look at some of these places that we've already been, and I can't wait to get out there. But we are looking at the museum and going back out there. But the complete people out there, you want to go see their team. You want to talk to them about everything in the museum. A lot of updates that they've done. So if you hadn't been to the museum in 2 years, you need to go back out there.
Very knowledgeable. The folks out there, like you'll go up to a display and we saw the not just the displays and heard the stories about Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, but we also they have the history of Western Kentucky being developed and what became the U.S. Tobacco Company or the American Tobacco Company and the revolt of the local farmers. It's going to be one of our future episodes. But you're going to want to get out to the museum. But in the meantime, I'm glad that you guys followed us here and you got to hear these great stories. We like getting those great stories from the folks that know them. Like us on social media, share us on social media. We're on every podcast app. We're on YouTube if you want to watch the YouTube video of us live. We're not much to look at, but you get to see something that you missed. if we're trying to do the shape of how big a bucket was.
You get to miss you miss our shining moment if you don't see us on YouTube, because that's our Michael Bay.
One shining moment.
We pull Michael Bay out of the old.
You don't want to listen to One Shining Moment and not see the highlights of the NCAA tournament. You want to watch.
Yeah, because that's where all the interesting stuff happens. So
that's what we do.
Don't miss out. YouTube is a great outlet for us. A lot of things to come for this year. So
again, thank you. Happy New Year 2022. It's going to be hard to write that on your checks and documents now. So start writing -22. Just start writing it now. But be kind to one another, and we'll see you guys soon.
Love you.